awake yet?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's good to hear. That's great. Okay, well, good morning. My name is Shay Webb, and I'm currently an informed consent writer at a CRO, and I have a passion for patient advocacy, just like my panelists here today. Today, we have Tiara Hayes and Sheila Johnson to share a little bit about what it means to be a patient advocate in the clinical research space and what we can do to keep the mission going. Tiara, I'll hand it over to you.
No pressure, no pressure. So my name is Tiara Hayes. You want us to do like a little intro or?
Anything?
Okay. So I'm a senior manager in patient and site engagement at Osaka Pharmaceuticals. So before I say anything else, I'll say as a disclaimer, everything that I'm saying today are my own ideas and thoughts. They do not represent Osaka Pharmaceuticals in any way. But I'm very excited to talk today on the panel with Shay and Sheila for patient advocacy because it's very important as we've seen as a theme for the entire conference so far. So I'm excited to speak today.
Hi. Is it on? Okay. Hi, I'm Sheila, and I am a patient advocate. I was diagnosed 13 years ago with metastatic breast cancer, and because of research, I'm still here because of my faith in God. I was active duty military when I found out my cancer had spread from my breast to my liver and ribs. So I came into this space, the research advocacy space, because I didn't see any women, first of all, with metastatic breast cancer that were Black. And I didn't see any women that were Black that, looked like me. Even my doctors, like none of my doctors, my radiation oncologists were Black. So I said, well, maybe I need to get into another space to meet Black women and see what Black women and men too are doing. So that's why I'm here, and thank you for inviting me.
What Sheila failed to mention is we actually have a superstar on stage because her movie, God's Grace, is going to be on BET, and she can talk a little bit more about that.
Premiered Thursday, actually. I was in Atlanta. And 2 years ago, a movie producer contacted me. He said, I want to do a movie about Black breast cancer. And I said, you were sure? So this is like 2.5 years in the making, and everything just came together, thank God, before the strike happened. And Demetria McKinney is playing me. Devon Franklin, is my love interest. It also talked about, I wanted facets of what Black women go through, like it's one scene where there's a mean receptionist because of the type of insurance that she thought I had. But when I said I have military insurance, her whole attitude changed. So I brought in clinical trials, and it was dedicated actually to my mom and dad, because my mom died of metastatic breast cancer as well. So it's streaming on BET, God's Grace, Sheila Johnson's story. And you like it?
Yeah. That's what she wants too. She also has her book with her. She's an author too.
Yeah, I thought I needed my legacy put in writing, so that's where I wrote the book. I have like 15, 20 copies. They're $20 if you would like to buy one, and I'll autograph it for you.
What's the name of the book?
A Survivor's Lens.
All right, well, as you can see, we have the superstars on our panel today. So I'll kick off our first question. This can be for both of you or for one of you, but what does it mean, and what can we do to empower ourselves as champions in diversity?
Well, for me, I was introduced to a clinical trial in 2018. And I go to WashU Psychic Cancer Center in St. Louis, Missouri. Anybody here from? Hey, girl! And my doctor introduced me to a clinical trial in 2018. It was Destiny Breast 02. And, I asked her lots of questions. I'm like, well, guinea pig, what's going on? She was like, no, and she explained every process. She explained the whole clinical trial to me. And then I talked to my clinical trial coordinator, talked about the informed consent. They wanted to rush, they want to rush you through. And it's like, no, maybe we need to, And I did. I went on it and it worked for 3.5 years. So that's why I wanted to not only talk about clinical trials, but not only did I want to walk the walk, I wanted to talk the talk as well. So that's why I agreed to participate in a clinical trial. And actually, I was on another clinical trial just recently and it failed. So medicine fails patients like me. I don't say that we lose our battles or medicine's failed us, with metastatic breast cancer. So, yeah, my doctor introduced me, and that's why I put myself in this. God gave me this platform, and I encourage, patients to continue to participate in clinical trials.
And I'll speak to it from two different lenses as a patient advocate. So I actually got into clinical research when my youngest sister was actually born with sickle cell. So that's what spearheaded my interest in clinical trials. So I see patient advocacy as really speaking up for patients who are children, who are infants, who are unable to speak for themselves in rooms where you might have the opportunity or the privilege to have a seat at the table. But also patient advocacy, if you're sitting at a sponsor or at a CRO, is really speaking up. And we heard the theme of courage a lot yesterday, and just having the courage to speak up, even if it doesn't make you the most likable person in the room. Hopefully in your career journey, you'll find yourself in a room where you're surrounded by people who welcome your ideas and welcome your thoughts, so that we can really elevate patients' voices at all levels of the clinical trial life cycle, from the ideation to delivering the actual clinical trial to actually having a product on the market to help be available for patients. So definitely encourage everyone, any aspect of patient advocacy that you could put yourself in the seat of, to definitely do that, even if it might be scary at first. But you'll get used to it, get more comfortable over time, and it is okay to be courageous, even if initially, you might get some pushback, but just know that you're doing it for the right intentions. The intention is everything.
So going back to one of your points, you were talking about patient advocacy. A lot of times we hear patient advocacy and some people think that it means going to Congress and advocating or being a lobbyist or just working at a company. But what does patient advocacy actually look like? What does it look like for you?
Okay. So patient advocacy for me, as a caregiver in a sibling to someone with sickle cell, it looks like if in my job or in my role, I have the ability to speak with physicians about upcoming clinical trials that could be helpful for the patients in their clinic. It looks like if there's opportunities to have conversations professionally with other people who work in the sickle cell space, to have those conversations as an employee or a professional. It looks like being able to insert myself into rooms or at the table where people don't normally consider patients. So if they have an idea for a certain clinical trial, am I speaking up for that patient group and asking, well, did you talk to patients yet? Are you considering what their burden is already on top of even considering a clinical trial? Can they even get to the doctor? So just having those types of questions in mind when they're considering a clinical trial, but then also for, like when I mentioned, the full life cycle, like from ideation to before writing the protocol, when they write the protocol, getting feedback on materials, understanding the sites. What does the site staff look like? Does it look like the community that they serve? Do they have interpreters, a language interpretation, so that if a patient comes to the site and they don't speak English, are they able to accurately understand what they're enrolling into? Understanding what the community or the prevalence is in that disease state, and understanding where we're placing our sites, because I know a lot of times in the industry, you go back to the traditional sites that you have long-standing relationships with, but let's switch it up and understand the different types of sites. Ryan mentioned a lot about that yesterday, about understanding the different types of mix of sites that you can have: community-based sites, institution sites, standalone research sites, what we consider like smaller mom and pop type sites. So just really understanding the different types of sites that we're having our trial available, and then also accessibility to those trials. As a patient, if they have a condition where, like Alzheimer's, but we heard that a lot on yesterday, do they have the support to be able to have their caregiver also come to their appointment? Do they have transportation? If they're living in an assisted living facility, are we going to make sure that they have the accurate care for it to get them safely from point A to point B? If they have agitation, are we putting them in an environment that's just going to annoy them, because that's not already a different environment that they're in than their care home? So just considering all those different things from the patient lens so that we can have an improved trial all around and not have amendments, meet our enrollment, because then we have the bottom line is like we want to have a successful enrollment on the trial, but we want to have representation for the end product and making sure that it works for the patients it's supposed to serve.
For me, it's just having a seat at the table. I don't know if you heard of metadata. They formed I'm a consultant for them, and they formed a patient's insight board. And I'm a part of the patient's insight board. And it was nice for me to be there because diversity, and we needed diversity. And it's like, how can you know what my community needs or our community needs, if you don't have a Black person at the table? So we do patient design. We work decentralized clinical trials, and like Tierra, I'm sorry, chemo brain. Like Tierra was saying, we make sure that they know about, transportation. Something as simple as parking, that's what I hear. Parking at WashU. When I was on a clinical trial, I was there from 7 hours to maybe 12 every 3 weeks, and I did this for 3.5 years. That's $15 in parking. That's over $1,000 of parking that a patient will have to pay. Something simple as that. And that's actually very important to patients. So we try to bring to the table the patient, like Tierra was saying, a patient burden of even, I would get free, WashU gives free parking anyway, but they would give me $25. Well, they didn't give it to me, I deserve it. But $25 in food voucher because I was gonna be there so long. And but just something as simple as that. Why can't we pay patients who can't transportation and different things like that when they're in clinical trials to make sure they make it to their appointments from transportation? But first of all, I always hear, well, we can't reach Black people, and it's like, but I was reached. So let's try this again. And then the survey is, it's not that Black patients don't want to participate in clinical trials, we're just not asked. So it's like,
Right.
So it's like, okay, we can, I understand that, the medical mistrust, because I asked the same question and I understand that. But it's like, what are you doing to help reach patients, And, at my hospital now, as soon as you get out the elevator, it's a sign that says, ask about a clinical trial. I walk into my doctor's office, it's her picture, and it says, ask me about a clinical trial. And then if you're in the waiting room, there's a screen and it's explaining clinical trials to you. So you have all these avenues as a patient to not only learn about clinical trials, but remind yourself, oh, let me ask my doctor about a clinical trial. And, sometimes I do hear from patients, well, are they going to give me a sugar pill? And it's like, if you're metastatic, they can't give you a sugar pill. So it's just a lot of myths and things that I try to get out to the Black community. It's like, no, they can't do that. No, they can't do that. But like I said, with metadata, I just wanted to be at the table to help be a part of the rate consents and make sure that, we're reaching the Black community the same way as we're reaching other communities. So.
That's a good point, and especially when we talk about diversity, a lot of times we're quick to say the word diversity, but slow to say the word inclusion. So when it comes to patient advocacy, what do you think the inclusion piece looks like?
I think it's just making sure that we're a part from beginning to end. And I love being a consultant for metadata because I'm there at the beginning. They get clients and customers and stuff. Even so much as a website, I'm like, there's no Black women or Black men on there, so we gotta change that. Or informed consent, maybe we need to make this shorter and quit using all this medical jargon and just get straight to the point, Or just different things like that, when we talk about decentralized clinical trials, it's like, well, what if a patient has to work? So now she has to go back home because she has to get this medicine delivered. So are you making sure that it's not inconvenient to the patient? The patient is always first. Even when I said in clinical trials, I would have to go in and get an EKG every 3 weeks. It was just routine. I had to get CT scans every 6 weeks. I had to get my heart checked every 2 months. So it's like, well, what does a patient do that have to have all these appointments? Like, are you making sure that the burden, why can't some of these things happen at the patient's house or somewhere closer to the patient's house, you know? So those are the things that, you know, I continue to advocate for, just to make sure that not only does a patient like myself have to worry about cancer, but that I don't have to worry about how I'm gonna get the treatment on my days.
No, that's a good point, and maybe both of you can answer the next question. We talk about our mistrust toward providers. Do you think there's a mistrust of the providers toward us when taking our medications, whether there's going to be user accountability or someone's going to do it wrong? And if there is, how can we fix that?
Okay. So yes and no. I think there is some level of mistrust because that's why it's important to include earlier in the process to have patients give feedback on the design of the protocol, because they might want to put a device, like for a decentralized trial, they might want to put a device in your home where you like log in and it might like have a camera so it knows that you're the one dispensing the medication, and then it'll dispense the medication that you need to take for the day at home. So if they want to put that in a patient's home, then you should talk to patients and ask them, what do you think of this? This is to give them an explanation as to why they have to do that level of like compliance. Break it down in a way that they can understand, so that they understand that, okay, well, we put this in your home, we're trying to increase compliance, we want to make sure that we're doing this in a safe manner, someone else is not taking your medication because it could be experimental medication. Just sit down and having a real conversation with patients so that they can understand the purpose why you're trying to create a protocol in that way, and then get feedback and work with them. What is the term I'm trying to think of? Like a co-working session where they can like work and collaborate with one another, so that we can get to a place that is actually useful and it actually has the patient in mind or their caregiver, because we also, like, you have pediatric trials. So what is a way that we can do decentralized model that can be compliant and also make it easier on parents? Because now you have a kid that's in school, they might have extracurricular activities, a parent who's working that already has to like get out of work for other, you know, parental type things. So what are some of the options that we can have for them available so that we can be compliant in delivering a trial, but also that a child isn't missing their visits because the way that we have our schedule isn't conducive to a parent's work schedule plus the kid being in school. So just infusing the patient, the caregiver, the healthcare providers, everyone is having that conversation to really make sure that everyone is aware why we have to design a trial in that way, but make it so that it's feasible to actually expect the patient or their families to be able to be compliant with it.
You know, one young lady on, you know, the patient's insight board I'm on, and she said that her refrigerator went out, and I think the medicine, her son's medicine was in there. But after 5 o'clock, she couldn't call anybody. So why not have a 24-hour helpline? You know, it's just little things like that that makes the patient burden less. You know, something as simple as, well, what if the patient, whatever the patient, it's not as far as medicine, but what if it's like something that they have, a shot or something, and it malfunctions? So who does she call on weekends? But she can't go he or she can't go without medications. So that's why it's important that patients are at the table at all times. I don't care what it is, whether it's clinical trials or whatever. We need to be at the table to make sure that you understand that we are the ones that are living with the disease, and we are the ones that's going to have to go on these clinical trials and make sure that, you know, just that we're at the table at all times. So.
Can I ask something else on that?
Please.
So when I started in clinical trials, I was at the site. I was a study coordinator. So I would also advocate for our company to include like some sessions with study coordinators. So maybe if we also are talking to patients, talk to study coordinators, because I know when I was at the site, our patients had our cell phone numbers. So if they needed something or something went wrong, or they ended up in the ER, they would call us, and we were expected to go and make sure everything's okay, that we contacted the sponsor, things of that nature. But if they're expected to do those things, or they might have instances that they can share about situations that patients were put in as well. That also gives them an opportunity to advocate for patients. So I definitely encourage you, if you are a person who is at a site, your sponsor should be looking for feedback from you. If you have any OSICA trials and you have feedback for any of those, please find me after. But they should be looking for feedback, or even if you're working with the CRO, just let that person, their patient recruitment team or their point of contact know feedback on the trial, because that is supposed to be getting back to us in some shape or form. And then to our earlier point, you were mentioning the work you did with Medidata. So a lot of sponsors in the industry work with a lot of patient insights companies. So the Insight Edge, the Bold Insights, Medidata, there's all these different Rare Patient Voice. There's a lot of different organizations that are doing the work to gain insights on behalf of sponsors. So if you're interested in looking into more of those, you can probably just like Google Patient Insights Company and insert like a condition. I definitely encourage you to join those boards, join those conversations. You do get compensated for any time you spend on those, and really help give input back to sponsors so that we can do better.
Okay, I want to do a quick vibe check. By show of hands, who has had their provider, their healthcare facility, their site, what have you, go an extra mile to tell you about clinical trials? How many people have had it like Sheila, where you walk in and you say, ask about a clinical trial? And we have 3. We have 4. Wow.
To do better.
We still need to do better, because I'm with the majority. I'm a person, I've lived with type 1 diabetes since I was 8 years old. And I've lived with rheumatoid arthritis since I was 18. But I really didn't hear about clinical trials until I studied it in school, because my bachelor's and my master's, they're all in clinical research. That's how I started learning about clinical research. I didn't do my first clinical trial until I was looking on Instagram one day, and they're like, hey, take this survey. And I'm like, okay, we take other surveys on Instagram, why not? It's like, okay, are you a female? Are you between this age group? Do you have this disease? And I'm like, oh yes, oh, you can be in this clinical trial. All that being said, do we feel that our healthcare providers and the sponsors and the enforcers that are around us, do you think they're doing enough?
No, I don't think so. I think we got a long way to go still. And I always ask that question. It's like, it's 2023. What are we doing? It's still talking about the same thing. Like, we know that 40% Black women had a higher rate of mortality in breast cancer. 40% higher rate. So 13 years ago, it's the same statistic. 5 to 6% of Black women participate in clinical trials. 13 years ago, same statistic. It's like, what are we doing? Like, it's, we putting all this money into inclusion and I think that's good. I think that's perfect. But it's like, what are we changing? What are the, statistically, what are we changing? Like I said, it's 2023, and it just seems like every year we're just talking about we need more Black women and men to participate in clinical trials. We need more Black women to do this, And, I always say, why is the onus on me, the patient, to go in and ask you about a clinical trial? That's not my job. You should be telling me about a clinical trial, And most patients don't think about that, But at least introduce it. It would have been nice, to be introduced to clinical trial at my first visit. I know, and my doctor actually takes a lot of time with me. I never feel rushed or anything, but just introducing, when I first was diagnosed, and I don't know if they're doing it now, but you get this blue bag, and you knew when you got the blue bag, you was your first time in the pod, getting your chemo, whatever, and then they make you watch like 4-hour videos about different things or whatever. And none of it was on clinical trials. So why not make a PSA about clinical trials so it can trigger your mind? Like, okay, I seen that, maybe a year or two, let me ask my doctor about it. There's so many ways that we can address and that we can help patients understand clinical trials, because it's not hard. And the onus should not be on me as a patient to ask you about a clinical trial. I just think No, because I got other things to think about, you know?
Yeah.
But I gotta go into my doctor and help you do your job? No, you need to be asking me, you know, or telling me about clinical trials, so.
I will say, I feel like yesterday we heard a lot about the new FDA guidance. Is from a business perspective, a lot of businesses are shifting to get in alignment with those guidances because they don't want to have to shut down operations when they finally decide to make it a regulation. So I think the pro of that guidance coming out and the most recent like Fedora coming out, things of that nature help push sponsors to be more responsible in making sure that we are taking that responsibility, and then those of us who have a seat at the table, having those uncomfortable conversations and really challenging our teams, our operation teams, our clinical management teams to do better. Just because this is all we need to meet this endpoint, or this is all we need to meet the goals that we might have as a business, we can still be doing better in an altruistic manner. Because we talked yesterday a lot about like trustworthiness and being helpful and offering services to the community and not expecting like a return, but doing things in a holistic manner to really just make patients more aware and have more educational opportunities to learn more about their condition. So I definitely see a shift happening in the industry. Unfortunately, it didn't happen a lot sooner, but I think we have more accountability at the governmental level. We have patients holding us accountable. When we have conversations with them, they're saying like, where are the results? Like, you should be returning results to us so we know like what our participation actually like contributed to the trial. When you come into our communities, I think the example yesterday was a politician coming to a church randomly, like having a continued presence, having that acclimates help us to engage with the community in a way that actually helps them because they're embedded within those communities so that we have a long-standing relationship. And so when they see the name of the company, that they don't have like these triggering thoughts come to their mind. They have like a friendly, approachable thought process that comes to mind and know that they're a trustworthy organization to be interacting with and have that true engagement.
I see. One thing I was taught growing up is that change starts at the top and it trickles down. Anyone else ever taught that? So where do we see the change starting? Is it at the top? Is it at the site? Is it at the sponsor? The regulatory authorities? Where do we need to start?
I would say from all levels. I think we saw like the perfect example yesterday where she wrote the political, not political, get off of that example, but the scientific article where she gave feedback to Moderna, and then also the Surgeon General was able to, from the top, be able to influence change as well. So I definitely say from any level, you can definitely be active as a patient advocate. So for my sister as a sickle cell patient, or just as a person with sickle cell in general, I'm not limited to just her clinic. I'm not limited based on the resources that are available in our immediate community. We can go out and have other opportunities to engage with different sponsors, different organizations, other patients to even learn from one another, because patients really do have like all the knowledge and information. So just connecting with other patients, having the know-how of how to like navigate health insurance, how to navigate if they're going to be traveling to a certain area, can I ask this like discussion group like, hey, has anyone traveled to this area? What are the resources in this area? So I definitely think that the approach to the problem can happen from multiple facets. It's not just like the sponsor, because as you see, like now, we're changing operations, we're changing how we move towards clinical trials because of all that outward influences that kind of have to guide us in the correct direction.
Like you said, I just think it's all levels, but I think that too, that all cancer centers should have patient advocates. So when I was diagnosed 13 years ago, it would have been nice for my doctor to say, hey, we have a patient advocate, just in case you want to talk to that patient. Patient advocate about, not so much about their disease, but to help you through the process. Because I went from the military healthcare system, which is universal healthcare, basically, to civilian healthcare, and I was like, a copay? What's a copay? I pay for a prescription? I didn't know. I was in the military for 25 years. Those are different things like that. Or even a clinical trial patient advocate. So if I'm going on a clinical trial, a patient is going on a clinical trial. So here's Sheila. Let her talk you through what you might have to go through, the different doctor's appointments or whatever. Also, too, every 3 weeks I was asked side effects. I was like, we can do better than this. Like, give the patients a calendar, or let's make an app for it where I could just put it in and you can see my side effects. So now I have to remember what side effects I had for 3 weeks, because I wasn't writing it down, really. But, and you just, it's just little things like that, that we can change. Like, it's just make it so easier, for the patient to, like I said, with side effects. And every 3 weeks they ask me the same question. Well, and every 3 weeks it's diarrhea, it's headaches, or nausea, and nausea was so bad, nausea and different things like that. But yeah, like she said, it's from all levels. We need to collect and get together and get on the same accord.
Can I ask you a question? So you mentioned possibly having like a clinical trial advocate. Do you feel like the study coordinator or like the research assistant on the trial, if they were equipped with the skills to do that, that you would feel comfortable receiving that information from them as far as like clinical trials?
I think the patient experience is important, and the clinical trial coordinator doesn't have the patient experience. All they're giving me is textbook answers. So the patient experience, when I can say, hey, I know how you feel, I know how you're scared, I know, you have to come back every 3 weeks, or you're scared of your scans every 6 weeks or whatever. I'm here for you, call me if you need me. Yeah. So I think from one patient to another, I think the patient experience is more important. But also too, I wanted to say, you were talking about data. We have all this data. What are we doing with it? And one thing I learned on the clinical trial is, what a lot of patients don't know is, you can ask for your medical data. So one time, after 2 years, I'm looking at the clinical trial coordinator. I'm like, well, what are y'all doing? What are y'all looking at? And she brought me, for 2 years, all my blood work, all my scans, and she specifically sat down with me and said, this is what we're looking at, because I had a fourth progression on my rib. But not all patients get that, but all patients should. And they should tell you at the beginning, you can always ask for your data, because it's your data. So when I found out about that, I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, it's a lot we got. I could go on, but I know we only got an hour.
Going into what we're talking about for advocates, a lot of times within the workplace, we're taught that find your sponsor, and that person who can speak for you in rooms that you can't speak for yourself. Do you think that applies toward the advocate role? Even if we don't know the patient, or HERPA laws may get in the way, what can we do?
I get a lot of patients that even now it's like, I want to participate in a clinical trial. What questions should I ask? Can you help me find a clinical trial? Patients don't even know how to find a clinical trial. But I'm like, your first resource should be your doctor. That's who you should be going to. Yeah, it's just so important to really, the patient. What was your question again? I forgot.
How can patient advocates be sponsors?
Okay. Yeah, we just speak out for patients. I always say, I don't know all of the Black community, but I know the Black community that's talking to me and saying the different things, how they were treated by their doctor, And the reason why I talk about my doctor all the time is because I want patients to know that this is the way you're supposed to be treated. You're supposed to talk about, you're not supposed to go in the office and feel rushed. If you ask your doctor, okay, I'm hurting, I might need, whatever pain medicine, doctor's not saying, well, what are you gonna do with it? You should know, this is, something as simple as a myth, what, Black people can take pain. It's like, where y'all hear that from? I'm scared needles. And it's just crazy, the things that you hear, even palliative care. Palliative care is not explained. Or even hospice. When you think of palliative care, some people think of it as hospice, but palliative care is just pain management. But this is stuff that we don't tell patients. It's not because we don't ask. It's you don't know what you don't know. You know. So, like I said, I don't try to speak for all because I don't know. But I do try to speak from the women and men that I hear about because men get breast cancer too. So.
Just to add to what you were saying, as being on the, like, as a professional, having that seat at the table, feel comfortable with saying that you aren't like the spokesperson. So like, I know some of us are like, might be the only Black person in the room, and so they might tend to just think that they can just bounce every single question off of you, and that you should be comfortable enough to answer the question on behalf of the entire Black community. You do not have to do that. You can push back and challenge them, say, well, I actually think a good idea is we could form a focus group of patients and really just ask them and make sure that we have, if we're having enrollment issues in this geographic region, maybe we should have a patient board that is focused on people who are located in this area that can give us specific feedback based on how we have the trial laid out or how we deliver the trial. Or because maybe, I think there was an example yesterday where they had sites located in a certain area of California that was not conducive to the population that they were trying to increase access to. And so just having those conversations and be comfortable pushing back. Hopefully there's not negative repercussions to that and you're not taken to HR. But hopefully you are feeling empowered in your workplace to be able to push back and really challenge the way that they might normally operate, and put in the right parameters so that they are engaging appropriately to get the right feedback. But to your point, it is okay to give some initial feedback based on the feedback that you have received. Because like for sickle cell, for example, when I did do trials that were related to that, I could come to the table and talk about my own personal experiences as a caregiver. I could talk about the experiences my parents had with the burden of trying to get her to different appointments when she already misses a lot of school because she has pain crises. So in that way, I definitely encourage people to take that information back. So like yesterday, there was like little tidbits that I had learned for AAD. I'm definitely taking it back to her. I was like, did you know that the former U.S. Surgeon General said that he looks at the data and he wants to know the information before he would talk to his mother about potentially putting her in, like her participating in a clinical trial. Because if there's not diverse data or that there wasn't a diverse patient set, he wouldn't feel comfortable putting his own mother in there. I was like, did you know the former U.S. Surgeon General said that? So just looking for those opportunities for empowerment and elevating patients who might not have a seat at the table to push them to go out and find them.
And I just want to say too, I read grants for proposals for the DoD Breast Cancer Research Program for many actually different organizations. And the one thing I see is we say women of color and then we say Black women. So it's like, well, who is this grant for? Women of color, or is it for Black women? And sometimes I see grants not funded because it's like we don't know, and it's specifically, grant is specifically for Black women. So make sure your language when you submit these grants, is it specifically for women of color or people of color, or is it specifically for Black women? It's whatever the grant says, if it's for Black women, for maybe going to take whatever the grant is for, whatever. But yeah, I read grants for Coleman, I read grants for PCORI, I read grants for, Cancer Care, for different organizations as a consumer reviewer, but it also makes me think, okay, and I think every grant is good, like, that's gonna be the cure, that's gonna be the cure. And it's like, no, that's a little too toxic, no, and that's what I bring to the table as a consumer reviewer, and as a patient, by reading grants, it's like, no, you wanna give me 3 chemos for what, So I don't have any quality of life, and that's what I bring to the table as far as that, so.
I think going off that point, when it comes to resources and the information that we do receive, I'm not sure about anyone else in here, but if I have a question about a clinical trial, the first thing I'm told is go to clinicaltrials.gov.
Yep.
Do we feel that's helpful, or do we think we need to evolve?
Oh, we need to evolve. That's website, I hear some doctors don't even know how to read.
Yes.
So how are you gonna direct
Yes.
me to clinicaltrials.gov? But there are so many other registries out there now for clinical trials. Like Coleman has one, Touch, the Black Breast Cancer Alliance has one that you could go in and search for clinical trials. But yeah, clinicaltrials.gov is overwhelming, it's confusing. You know, and then a lot of times I ask Black women like, okay, do you know your subtype? Many Black women don't know their subtype. It's like, you need to ask this because that's going to drive your treatment. Or do you know your stage? Well, I can't remember, and I understand that, you know, when you're going into the office, you know, your mind is just all over the place. And I also tell people to record their conversations with their doctors so they can take it back home and listen to it and say, hey, okay, she said this, or to make sure that they write things down. But your first resource always needs to be your doctor, always. And if your doctor can't help you, yeah, they should help you find a resource to, and I'm not gonna say go out and get a second opinion for that, but, you know, but, yeah, clinicaltrials.gov is, they need to make that a lot simpler.
And I will say for, like, in the industry, you were seeing more of a movement towards sponsors or having their own websites where they're sharing their things in a patient-centric manner, where they're, or say we, there, I just want to make sure I use the right verbiage, so I don't speak for my company. But there's a lot of feedback being received from patients and caregivers, or just people to make sure layman terms is actually layman terms. And so, like you were saying, like the medical jargon, trying to remove as much as that's possible, but still having accurate information being provided to everyone to be able to receive information. If they want to learn about trials that a certain organization is doing, then they will have an opportunity to be able to go to access a resource that is made and tailored specifically for them to be able to understand it using terminology that people in that indication or that disease state are familiar with. Because a lot of times medical communities use one term for their condition, but the patients use a completely different one. So making sure that's integrated in, making sure there's versions of that website available in different languages to ensure that globally, if people are interested in it, that they're able to access the information in language that is most comfortable for them. And then also from the accessibility piece, making sure that they have any type of impairment of being able to see things differently, and making sure we're including that built into the website as well, so they can have the option to switch it so that they can accurately receive the information.
Thank you, ladies. Well, we have a couple of questions that have come in for our panelists that we are going to transition to. And the first one is there a way to apply patient advocacy principles in places from other than the study design and the protocol? For example, in the areas of technology used for data collection or how the data is managed.
Yes, there's definitely opportunities to integrate that into tech because there's so much technology coming out now. There's so much of it being infused in clinical trials, and we're only going to continue to see more of it as we kind of continue to progress and innovate as an industry. So I definitely think there's a place for like the medical device team or anyone who is touching the actual device that we might be putting into patients' homes. So there's definitely opportunities to elevate the patient voice there, to let them know, like, this is crazy that you think I'm supposed to let this machine inject me with something. Getting that feedback so they know, okay, maybe that's not the best direction to go, or being able to say, like, this dispensing machine, I'm not able to understand, like, what it's prompted me to do. I feel like this is an invasion of my privacy. If you're gonna have a camera lens, like, in my home, does it turn off after my medication is dispensed? Those types of things. There's definitely opportunities there. And then also, as we continue to decentralize trials, and we might do like virtual visits or things of that nature, definitely opportunities there to improve the process that patients, or the journey for them to participate in clinical trials, and being able to use the technology in a way that is feasible and not a burden. Because if they are stressed out just trying to use the technology, most likely they're probably not going to want to continue in the trial, or that might influence them for any other trials that might be in their disease state, that they might not even want to like bother with trials anymore because of that experience that they have with your device, technology, or decentralized trial option you gave them.
And I think when you're using technology, we have to make sure too that the patients have internet, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot of, you know, if you're giving me an iPad, you know, is the iPad already gonna be connected to the internet, or do I need home internet? And a lot of patients can't afford internet, so are you gonna pay for my internet during that trial? Different things like that, so, yeah, technology, we just have to be careful, I think, just to make sure patients are equipped with everything the clinical trial needs.
And just for the sake of time, we're going to combine this last question for both of you. And that is one, okay, as I review a protocol for a trial, what are some common red flags that indicate patient advocacy was not taken into consideration? And what are tips we can use on how to reduce bias in the clinical research community?
Okay, so yes, I think there have been scenarios where I reviewed a protocol that's like already been out for like years, and I'm just like, you really thought you were going to enroll patients with this protocol? For example, the length of the study visit. I'm just like, who has that much time? Like you also have the caregiver that has to miss work, and they already have the burden of being the caregiver. Like their life is circles around this patient, and so yeah, I definitely seen a lot of scenarios where it's very obvious that no patients were spoken to, or they just had like an internal discussion and were just like, yep, sounds good. Let's go ahead and put that out there. So definitely you have seen that happen a lot, and I'm hoping that with some of the external entities that be, such as like the FDA, that we are forced to engage with patients. If I don't have a seat at the table, that there's like other forces at hand that are pushing the people who have a seat at the table to do the right thing and include patients to infuse the right process, so that we actually don't have to go through a bunch of amendments just because we find out a patient doesn't want to sit in one room for 12 hours, because no one wants a regular individual that has no condition whatsoever wouldn't want to sit in a room for 12 hours for anything. I mean, unless, they get to sleep for 12 hours or something and they get paid for it. But stuff like that happens all the time. But I definitely see a wave of change, so I'm hoping that wave continues. And then for those of us who have a seat at the table, to pull people in where we can, and then where we can't pull people in, just like have that internal voice to shift that. And what was the second question?
Tips on how to reduce bias in clinical research.
I think tips to reduce bias, we had a lot of resources that were shared yesterday, so I won't go over those again, but I think we definitely need to encourage pushing out those resources so that our sites are aware that those are existing. But then I think to also decrease bias is making sure that if we're working with different sites, that we're making sure that they're representative of the community that they're serving, so that if I don't know who gave the example, I think earlier, the panel right before this one, they were mentioning that a patient came in and they were like completely freaked out because the doctor didn't look like them. They weren't sure that they were going to understand their point of view on receiving treatment. So we just have to be aware and cognizant of those types of things and make sure that any opportunities, like making sure a site is diverse in meeting the needs of their community, or if they have a horrible review, that we're not thinking that, oh, well, if we just flush a bunch of money this way, they'll be successful. No, they have horrible reviews. There's a reason why they have horrible reviews. You probably shouldn't put a site there. So I think there is multiple opportunities, but that's just one.
I do just want to add one thing. So I was on this clinical trial. It doesn't have no do with your question, but I was on this clinical trial for 3.5 years, and I did not get one thank you from the sponsor. My doctor did now, but it would have been nice to get a thank you from, I'm not gonna say who the pharmaceutical company was. No, I'm not. But just to thank you for participating in a clinical trial and letting the patient know that they appreciate you. We appreciate you, because I think I was in the phase 2, so it was like 187 of us, 187 thank yous, that's nothing. You can computer generate it, well, I can't. It'll just been, just been nice, to get a thank you, just thank you. And to tell patients, okay, where is, the information gonna be? I knew my trial, it's in her too now. It was actually FDA approved in 2019, but to tell patients where they can get the information about the trial, like what happened during the trial, did it get approved or anything like that, just to keep patients up to date on, the trial that they were on, so.
Thank you. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming to our panel on empowering diversity.